Hello and welcome to the latest episode of No Accounting for Taste with me, Matthew Ord, and the familiar voices of AccountingWEB's managing editor Richard Hattersley.
Hello.
And technology editor Tom Herbert.
Hi Matt, hi everyone.
The three of us are back to take a look at the big talking points of the moment, with the highlight of last week undoubtedly being the Accounting Excellence Awards. It was a great night, Richard, celebrating some of the profession's finest talent. How was it for you?
Oh, it's Hollywood Accounting Excellence Awards, isn't it? You go there, you're at the magnificent Roundhouse, you just see all those people that you've spoken to throughout the year, catching up with them, everyone going along for a fantastic time. Many of those people shortlisted as well for an award. So it's just a great night in the accounting calendar, just to get everyone together and just have a good party, and also celebrate all those people that you've been seeing and learning from over the past 12 months.
Absolutely, yeah. How about you, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, it was a good evening. I'm not much of a dancer, so a lot of the evening was spent sort of swapping scurrilous rumours in quiet corners. But I don't know about you, Richard. I think the first one I went to was in 2015, and I think we called it the Practice Excellence Awards back then. I was trying to think, like, where was it? I frustratingly, I can't remember or find any evidence of where it was. But anyway, it definitely wasn't as big as whatever it was, 650 accountants we had in the room last week. So it is great to see how far it's come and how much it's grown. I mean, one point I'd like to make, you can tell when it's cutting through, when the sort of outside feedback starts to come in. Accountancy is quite a small place, and for a couple of days afterwards, my social media feed is kind of full of accounting excellence stuff. And I can see how it might be annoying for some people if you're not involved. Normal services is cut off. But I've seen a few posts sort of outraged by the concept of awards. The very concept. And that sort of ranges from the snarky ones like, well, I prefer to provide good client service than win silly awards. Newsflash, you can do both. But then there's some full-on like frothing at the mouth 1,500-word epics about how awards are symptomatic of the corruption of the industry. Proper tinfoil hat wearing stuff. And I just to be clear, I kind of feel like it's fairly obvious, but it probably needs to be said. I mean, if this didn't exist, another awards show or maybe more would sort of spring up, like those mythical Hydra's heads. But they're a part of all industries, whether you like that or not. You can always look away. You don't have to enter. We don't force firms to enter. So I don't really understand why people need to post their steaming hot takes for a bit of clout. Secondly, I mean, it's not the Nobel Peace Prize. Like, it's a fun night where people who've been nominated can come out, let their hair down and celebrate their achievements. And firms are genuinely delighted to be shortlisted and to win. Like, a lot of accountancy is fairly thankless, so it's nice to be recognised. And it's not for everyone, and that's absolutely fine. There were also some pretty serious allegations bandied about paying for the awards, which, I mean, there are libel laws in the UK, so you might want to look them up before posting stuff like that. But, I mean, to address the point, speak to any of our independent judges, accountants and industry professionals. You can find them on the website. The judging process is vigorous. The editorial team are involved, and quite frankly, it's a pain in the backside. Honestly, it'd make our lives much easier if we just gave them to people who paid us, but we don't. And the entries are actually really helpful in terms of like setting our editorial agenda for the rest of the year. I mean, Richard, you're working on a report as we speak, aren't you? So
absolutely, and looking at the firms which have entered and looking at what they're doing, there's a good reason why these firms are finalists and winning awards, because they're doing some fantastic things and setting the agenda for the rest of the profession to follow. And it's clear in what they're doing, reading through these entries what they're doing. And so thanks very much for flagging that, Tom. And the judging process is very vigorous, and we've all been in heated discussions during those judging processes. So yeah, it is it is incredibly rigorous process. So thanks, Tom.
Well, sticking with you, Richard, you wanted to kick things off this week with a look at the budget. We're now less than a fortnight away from the government's first one, and there are lots of rumours swirling around Westminster, so what can we expect?
Yes, we're less than 2 weeks away from the budget, and like always, there are plenty of rumours, speculation, kite flying happening outside the treasuries. But before we go into what Rachel Reeves might actually be an announcement, let's take a few steps back, because there's been some pushback to some of the rumours, and I think some of that could be maybe could have been avoided. The first misstep is probably the timing of the budget. Let's not forget that Labour got into power on the 4th of July, and here we are it's going to be about 17 weeks later by the time of the budget. That's a long time that we've gone without any kind of fiscal policy to hang a hat on, aside from, of course, that tough talk of grim economic times ahead for everyone, brace yourselves, and all that's kind of created this bit of a political vacuum where all businesses have been aware of is that there's a £22 billion black hole and there's grim times ahead. And that's not exactly that great for businesses, not really great for anyone during that period where there's not an awful lot to talk about. And so naturally, there's going to be plenty of rumours and speculation which are going to be filling that vacuum over that course of all those weeks. And so there's been plenty of rumours that's been coming out. I want to kind of highlight a few of those because there's been some which have taken up more conversation than others. The first rumour, of course, the one which has been getting plenty of steam and reaction over the past few days, is of course this rumoured increase to employers' national insurance. This one's been one which everyone's been talking about. The controversy here, of course, is that whether or not this would break Labour's manifesto pledge. Everyone remembers Labour at the general election promised not to increase taxes on, quote, working people, including national insurance payments. So they specifically said three things: national insurance, income tax, and VAT. So they've already set the stall. Rumours have started coming through that there could potentially be an increase to employers' national insurance. Labour's response is that they were adamant that they were referring to working people, meaning employees, I guess. So there we go. Plenty of people's kind of gone back and forth whether this would break a manifesto pledge. Dan Needle seems to think it would break a manifesto promise, saying the promise is an increase in employer national insurance is a tax increase on working people. It would break Labour's pledge. He continues, why? Because in the long run, the economic cost of employer national insurance is borne by employees. So let's not get too hung up on that, but there's been plenty of conversation about whether it would break a manifesto promise. So what would they actually do? The FT is reporting that employers do not pay any national insurance on their pension contributions if Reeves forces companies to begin paying NI at 13.8% in line with other expenses and benefits they give to employees. That would raise up to 12 billion from the private sector employees by the end of the decade, according to the Resolution Foundation. So of course that would be quite a heavy chunk that would take away from that 22 billion. But of course this already set the cat amongst the business pigeons, who already, we've got that big vacuum where there's not been that much fiscal policy discussion, plenty of uncertainty because there's not really been much talked about. And so we're already seeing businesses kind of outlining the negative impact this hike could potentially have. Rebecca Bennyworth has kind of set it out on Twitter. She said, thinking about potential increase in that employer NIC, my small business clients have soaked up over 20% rise in minimum wage in 2 years. Low pay commission recommendation is another approximate 9%, bringing compound rise to around 30%. How do they feel? If you are late 50s, struggling to get staff who can turn up every day and facing losses as you can't sustain staff cost increases, guess what? They would close. jobs and business gone for good. This is reality for lots of small business owners. And I think that's probably a reality for lots of our listeners with their small business clients, with fears of potential increases to employee national insurance. So for that one, it feels that one is certainly causing a lot of uncertainty, and is causing businesses to kind of take a step back. And we're in this period before the budget where they're not quite sure what to do, and this is probably not great for the UK in general.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm still thinking about your cat amongst the business pigeons, Richard. Little pigeons with little ties and. Sorry.
Wow, we've got plenty of those kind of pigeons around this neck of the woods with their beautiful little ties. So that's rumour one. Rumour two, of course, is the increase to capital gains tax. There's been having unanimous consensus that CGT is probably going to increase on October the 30th. That's probably not a big spoiler. It's been trailed since the, I think even pre-election, that was something that was being discussed. The Guardian reported earlier this month that Rachel Reeves is considering a increase of CGT of 30 to 39%, which James Quarmby, as partner at Stevenson Harwood, who's written for AccountingWEB a couple of times, he called this scaremongering on LinkedIn. He said HMRC's own modelling shows that an increase to only 30% would lead to a loss of 2 billion in 2027-28. By extension, an even higher increase in rates would lead to even greater losses. Such an increase would also squash investment appetite and would not be good for UK PLC. Starmer has kind of tried to downplay this week at the investment summit in London. He said, responding specifically to questions about an increase of 39%, the PM said a lot of the speculation about tax increase is getting, quote, pretty wide of the mark. So maybe not an increase of 39%, but probably an increase. So we've got a CGT increase. Other potential rumours, well, the government's already announced an intention to reform the taxation on private carried interest. Probably expect that. More on that at the budget. The government's already published an update to proposals on the abolition of the non-dom regime. So maybe a bit more about that, or maybe even a slightly watered down version of that, because there's been rumours that maybe the plans wouldn't raise as much as what the government had thought it would. So maybe they might revert back to what the Conservatives had set out, who knows, at the spring budget. Other potentials, fuel duty, that's been frozen for about a decade now, so we could potentially see that freeze be thawed at the budget. Fiscal drag, probably that's going to continue, so maybe they might extend that beyond the frozen thresholds, which already has been set out to 2028. And the other one, which maybe we could hear a lot about, is of course tax avoidance. The government said they want to reduce the tax gap. James Murray, dearly appointed Exchequer Secretary to the Treasuries, one of his objectives is to close the tax gap. So maybe with him now in post as HMRC chair, we might see that be moved up the agenda, and that may play a role in HMRC in the budget. Reeves already said that she's committed to hiring 5,000 new compliance officers for HMRC, so maybe further investment for HMRC. And we've not heard much from the Raising Standards in the Tax Profession consultation, so maybe that may play a role. So that's just a few of the potential things we could hear at the budget. So if you have a budget bingo, if you're going to play budget bingo in your offices, maybe scribble those down and stamp them off if and when they get announced at the budget. But I don't know. The main conclusion I've really got from all of this is I'm feeling budget burnout already. All the speculation, we've not actually had the budget, and I'm just fed up of it, and it feels like the budget's never going to arrive, and I can't believe it's still 2 weeks away.
It's absolutely frenzied online, isn't it? Yeah, I've seen a lot of posts on LinkedIn, particularly from wealth creators, talking about how the country's going to the dogs for something that hasn't actually even been announced yet. So, yeah, fascinating.
I'm exhausted, and it's still not even here yet. And all these rumours and speculation are just that at the moment. So there we go. I've taken up about 15 minutes of your time, and the main conclusion is we know nothing. Matt, back to you.
Well, you made an interesting point at the start there, Richard, about the timing of it, because I remember when Labour first came into power, you had a genuine concern that it was actually going to be announced the day after the Accounting Excellence Awards, which would have been very difficult.
Prognosticator I am.
Yeah, so as much as it seems to be taking a while to get here, I think we are relieved that it isn't happening on that Wednesday instead, aren't we? So we'll take what we can get. Now, Tom, you wanted to talk to us about the Payroll Site announcing its plans to close in 2025. What does this mean for the business pigeons?
Those business pigeons, eh? Yeah. It's like our off-license owner in Nuneaton, or whoever the everyman is. How will this affect the business pigeons? Yeah. I mean, I should probably talk about making tax digital, so I think I'm just a bit bored of it, like, nothing much is happening. We'll probably hear more about MTD and the budget. The rumours are there'll be a few notices about it, but HMRC and the Treasury have stopped answering my emails, so we'll see. I don't know. I don't think I'm on the naughty step. Maybe I am. Who knows? But anyway, let's talk about the Payroll Site. Yeah, this is news that the award-winning payroll software, the Payroll Site, is to close its doors at the end of the current tax year. A few people got in touch with me last week to say they'd had messages about this, and it was confirmed later on in a post on the developer's website. I mean, I appreciate it's a smaller story than a lot of the stuff we cover on the pod, but I mean, looking back at the Payroll Site's heyday, they did have thousands of customers, and I mean, they won 5 of our Software Excellence Awards when we used to run them. Gone but not forgotten. So, I mean, it's a decent product. I think there are a bunch of like wider trends and undercurrents maybe to discuss off the back of that as well. But your question, so why have they closed? I did reach out to Stephen, one of the brothers behind the Payroll Site. For completely understandable reasons, he wasn't that keen on talking. The message they put on their site and sent to customers cited declining customer numbers and the increasing burdens of running the service. So having an unviable business, obviously a big factor. But by the way, I'd like to applaud the way they've actually done this in an orderly and transparent manner. They haven't just gone quiet and ghosted their customers like others who've like played around in the space and got bored because they haven't got instant success and just switched off their product. They've said we're closing. They've given their customers 6 months to find new software and prepare for what's actually quite a tricky process, shifting payroll software. So I think that is to be applauded. Anyway, so why is their product gone from being a successful one to not so successful? I guess legislation change is a starting point. Like particularly during COVID, all the horsing around with the rates was a nightmare for the payroll software vendors, obviously having to constantly switch their product at pretty much a day or two's notice. I mean, just from what I heard, it was slightly easier for the cloud providers to react to the latest developments, sort of roll out the changes overnight rather than desktop software having to issue updates or patches, having the users download and install, etc. But that's kind of a minor point. The changes keep coming. Development work is expensive, particularly in complex areas like payroll, and it does need to be perfect, because if you get something wrong, then that's a major problem. People don't get paid. I mean, as well, just from a software landscape point of view, I think we're also now in the period where everyone is trying to do everything. So for big players in the bookkeeping or general ledger space, they've kind of hit a bit of a ceiling in terms of percentage growth. Quite a lot of people are now on cloud accounting software, so these guys need other revenue streams or areas to grow into, and payroll's one of them. So when the Payroll Site launched in 2004, I'm not sure it was the only cloud payroll tool in town, but it was quite a narrow field. And I mean, since then we've seen Xero, Sage, QuickBooks, Iris. I guess Iris acquires Staffology, KPM, BrightPay's moving to cloud. So there's a lot more new players in the space as well. So the likes of Buddy, FreshPay, Coconut just bought MyPAYE. So it's fairly competitive, which I guess plays into the sort of falling customer numbers space. I think it's a shame they've gone, as they seem like a good business with a good ethos. I mean, one of the questions that someone asked in the comments, and I had as well, was why hadn't they sold rather than just closing the business down? But I wasn't able to ask them. So, maybe we'll find out eventually. Who knows?
You've mentioned there, Tom, about this influx of legislation making the payroll software market more complex and demanding, and you've got all these competitors moving into the cloud payroll space as well. Is there a concern there that there could be another victim of those circumstances?
Yeah, potentially. And I think what the concern is, I think around innovation as well, because whether you like it or not, the big players don't tend to drive that much innovation. It's the small guys coming into the space. We saw a massive boom in the sort of late 10s, early 2020s, where I guess investor cash was cheap and a lot of new products launched in different areas, and that did drive a whole bunch of expansion. But ultimately, a few of those ran out of road, or suddenly investor belts became slightly tightened, and they started to call their money back in, and so they either had to raise prices, or I guess a bunch of these new companies ended up selling. And I think because of that, people, whether they want to or not, may end up with the larger vendors because they know they're not going to go out of business. They stick with some of the sharper practices around pricing because they know that actually they're not going to have the rug pulled out from under them if the smaller company goes belly up. So yeah, it's a tricky one, really.
Well, as always, thanks very much for the insight, Tom. I want to see us out this week with a look at the changing role of the CFO. Grant Thornton has released a pulse survey which polls 500 finance leaders to uncover their biggest opportunities, the difficulties they face, and perspectives on their role. It looks at 8 key themes, one of which is one we're going to focus on, is how the business is changing and will continue to do so. As far as what aspects of their job they think will change over the next 5 years, you've got 40% of the CFOs surveyed saying a greater focus on people management and talent development, 39% responding with an increased involvement in decision making, and 32% thinking that enhanced risk management and compliance oversight was going to come more into their view. The report noted that the shift is well underway. It also notes, Tom, that most CFOs are planning a digital transformation program for their finance function. And I suppose with the onset of AI and all the other technological advancements that we're seeing at the moment, it's no surprise that these roles are having to change and adapt a little bit.
Yeah, CFO as IT bod is definitely a thing, isn't it? I guess we've kind of moved on slightly from, the finance leader being Nigel in the corner office with his spreadsheets, who doesn't come out except when it's budget time, as actually now, I guess particularly for the CFO, is a strategic role. They walk the shop floor either literally or virtually, and are involved. I mean, in a lot of cases, the accounting system is the business system. And so you've got all these different financial and non-financial things sort of flowing into it, as it were, and the CFO is at the heart of that. And so you can see why having them fundamentally involved in these digital transformation programs is essential, really.
Well, I spoke to Becky Glover about this. Becky was, of course, Finance Director of the Year in 2023 and a finalist at the Accounting Excellence Awards 2024. She told me that CFOs have a lot of skills that can be utilised outside of just finance, adding that they also have a lot of data within their system. So naturally, CFOs are best placed to take on some other tasks that weren't traditionally linked to finance. I also spoke to Kieran O'Donnell, Finance Director of the Year 2024 finalist as well, who noted that the early stage companies that he's working with often have a need for not just a fractional FD, but experience to overcome pinch points, broker internal and external discussions or negotiations, manage relationships from sales or commercial through to investment. And the pair of them were in agreement that there's a risk of the CFO becoming too stretched with their role evolving, although Kieran noted that it could also cement the role and value of the CFO. That's all we've got time for today. Join us on the next episode of No Accounting for Taste for a roundup of all the big goings on. But until then, take care.